Hey, what's up guys? UrAvgWarGamer is back with another video of World of Warships. And in this video, I have a very unique topic and it's about destroyers. Particularly the best anti-destroyer that you can help in this game. What are those destroyers and how good actually they are? I will give you some numbers and some, explanation of why these destroyers are particularly pretty good against carriers. Why their entire defenses are actually good, and how to mitigate a lot of those damage that carriers can deal against you in a destroyer. But the unfortunate reality in this game is most destroyers, which I'm not going to talk about, most destroyers have either poor A or very mediocre entire defenses. And the problem with the carriers is they have very high alpha damage with the planes. If I can show you quickly, for example, now this is Midway, right? This is one of the Tech 3 aircraft carrier that you can actually play in this game for free. And the thing about these planes and their alpha damages is that it is kind of balanced for every class. You include it like battleship, cruisers, destroyers, and even aircraft carriers, okay? Because of the general balance against all ship classes, it has some really good alpha strike. I mean, for example, if you do use these rockets, you have 30 rockets in a single strike. And if you hit onto the superstructure of battleship, you can actually deal 10k damage or 12k damage, even with HVARs, which are, less alpha damage, 2000 alpha damage in this case, compared to tiny tims. And the thing is that battleships and heavy cruisers does have a lot of HP. But in the case of destroyers, well, can you see here, if I can show you one destroyer, for example, the Fenyang, it has only mediocre 22,000 HP, which is very typical of a lot of destroyers in the Tech 3 as well as in the premium. And so what really happens is, if you don't have really good anti-defenses and the carrier's alpha is kind of designed that it can deal a lot of damage to battleships or cruisers, well, destroyers will ultimately going to take huge damage because they have really less HP and even no heals. I mean, in the case of battleship, for example, maybe the Schlieffen, it does have a heal, right? A lot of ships does even have a super heal, right? But in the case of destroyer, for example, if I take on the Fenyang does not have not only good anti-defense, but also does not have access to heal. Maybe there might be a couple of exceptions. Kleber have saturation mechanics, those mechanics that help mitigate some of the damage that will happen when you are pretty low, but still you don't have heal, right? And the carriers definitely getting a lot of value when they just deal a lot of damage to a destroyer, because you will just completely halt their impact, especially in the case of Midway. Midway bombs are insane, right? They do 11k damage and they're balanced around all ship classes. And poor destroyers also going to take these bombs, so you can see where this is going. And that's why I want to showcase you some of the destroyers that are actually very, very good against the CVs, okay? I'm not gonna say that it will just prevent the strikes like crazy, but I can just guarantee you that you will be able to not only shoot down a lot of planes compared to the normal destroyers, but can actually stop at least one strike. If the carrier does 2 strikes on you, now he won't be able to do at least 2 strikes, or at least at the tier 8 carriers that does want to hurt, for example, the case of Ragnar, well, it's gonna have a problem, okay? It will be taking a lot of A damage, and he will definitely going to suffer a lot of loss, especially at tier 8, as well as even in tier 10, I would say. It's not that bad. So let's talk about the Ragnar and the numbers, the factual numbers. Why this destroyer is pretty good in anti-defense, okay? The anti-defense rating of the Ragnar is 94, which you can clearly see it is very, very competitive, okay? You usually don't see destroyers having that good rating of anti-defense in general. The reason is pretty simple. If you look at the mid-range aura in the continuous damage section, the firing range is 4 km, which is like slightly higher than opposed to like 3.5 km, which is usually and typical of medium range aura. And you also have really good medium range, like it's probably one of the best, I would say the best medium range AA continuous damage as well as 4 km aura. This continuous damage is crazy. It's higher than most of the cruisers at this tier. I have put a flag of the continuous AA damage increase. Also, it increases the AA shell explosions, but the base is still around 669, which is the highest out of all destroyers, and even some, like I would say, most cruisers in this game. If somehow you manage to kite away from the carrier that is trying to strike you, and they get into 4-kilometer aura, and they will stay their planes, or I would say hover their planes over you for a long time, this continuous AA damage is kind of cracked. But the problem with this is that it's only 4-kilometer, and its long-range AA guns is basically tier 6 or tier 7 levels of AA. It's absolutely garbage, I would say. The medium range AA is like amazing, and the long range AA is like probably some of the weakest out of all destroyers in this game. So this is like an extreme of two things, medium range and long range. So your best chance to mitigate a lot of damage from the carrier is that you just turn off your AA, and because if I can show you the concealment by air is 3.8 kilometers. I haven't put the concealment build on it, but if you do it, it will get down to 3.8 kilometers, where you will just turn on the AA when it hovers over you, the CB planes. Well, it will be already in your medium range aura, and try to make sure that the planes are as much as possibly able to be in that medium range aura, because then you will be able to shoot down tons of planes. And I'm telling you, tier 8 carriers will definitely going to get hurt with this Ragnar AA. And the moment the plane goes out of 4 kilometers, you just turn off your AA, you just go dark, and when it comes back, you just turn on again. And this is the game of switch on and off if you want to utilize the medium range aura as best as you possibly able to do so. And with these insane numbers, which is 702, well, you are definitely going to shoot down a lot of planes. But I can't say that you will not going to, mitigate damage. It's not possible. It will still do some strikes. It will still try to harass you with spotting. This is something that you have to understand, but otherwise you will be shooting a lot of planes. And Ragnar does that really well. Unfortunately, it's a steel resource destroyer, okay? It's not one of the best anti-destroyers in the game, but still, I would highly recommend Ragnar just for that. One more thing to keep that in mind, that Ragnar does not come with the defensive AA fire, okay? Compared to Halland, not having a defensive AA is kind of understandable, because the continuous AA damage will get over 1,000 because of the defensive AA fire, which could be pretty bonkers against even tier 10 aircraft carriers. So I would say at least they have tried to still help a lot of carrier players than destroyer players, unfortunately. But that is the case for destroyer, even for Ragnar. Also, one of the things I would say a weakness of Ragnar is that it does not have a lot of shell explosions in a salvo, which means not a lot of flags, and only 3 of them, even though you do have a big action zone of 6.9 kilometers. It kind of feels like it's not worth it, even if they have given Ragnar a 6-kilometer action zone, while increasing some of the long range A damage would be like from 41 to like maybe 150. I would definitely take that over this only pitiful 41 number for damage by long range AA guns, which is unfortunate reality for Ragnar, but still very good destroyer against carriers at least. Okay, so let's talk about another very powerful anti-air destroyer in this game. And I think this will definitely come in your mind. Obviously, I'm talking about the Halland. Now, Halland has, in terms of numbers, the anti-defense is actually pretty good. The long-range AA guns, 151, just like I was talking about the Ragnar, they should have increased the long-range AA guns. Would be pretty nice if they do that in Ragnar, but that's not the case. The long-range AA guns is the highest for Halland, and the medium-range AA guns damage, which is 364 in this case, is second highest. The first one is Ragnar, and the second highest AA continuous damage on the medium-range AA guns is obviously Halland. It also have 4-kilometer firing range with 100% hit probability, which means you will be doing pretty much pure DPS, or I would say damage per second, with these numbers onto the carrier planes, which is pretty nice. And on top of that, Holland at least have come up with defensive AFI, which obviously with 6 shell explosions and a salvo, which I would say 6 flags, it would be pretty devastating against aircraft carrier. It's going to be really rough to dodge even these flags for even sometimes good CV players, because Holland flags are a lot of them, and the continuous damage is so much with defensive AFI that you will start to shoot down tons of planes, especially if the player is below average or even slightly above average sometimes. Only the very, very good players will be able to mitigate some of the Holland A defenses of flags, as well as they will try to just get out of the medium A range quickly to be able to just having their less planes shot down. And that's what a good carrier can do. Otherwise, they will still going to take heavy losses with defensive AFI of Holland. Probably, I would say even better than Ragnar, the best anti-air destroyer in this game. Very, very powerful. The numbers are probably the highest out of all. Like, it's not a contest. Holland has the highest numbers, at least at tier 10 I'm talking about, okay? Super destroyers, I will explain them later, but the Holland has really, really high numbers in terms of good anti-air defense. One more thing that I want to talk about Holland and Ragnar, since they are pan-European destroyers, well, there is a special captain that I have actually put it on Gdansk for myself. Although I would recommend Jerzy Swirsky for Holland or Ragnar. You can easily put on Ragnar because Ragnar is premium. But in the case of Gdansk and Holland, I prefer that on Gdansk. This is my personal opinion. But if you're looking to increase your anti-air defenses even further, there's a skill, which is AA Gun Expert. If you're able to shoot down 20 planes, which is very, very much possible in the case of Holland and Ragnar, you will get straight buff of continuous AA damage. And one more thing about the Jerzy Swirsky is that it also has slightly better continuous AA damage increase when you started to lose a lot of your HP, which is also buffing the anti-air even more. That's the power of Swirsky on these pan-European destroyers, especially on Holland. It will improve the anti-air defenses even further with defensive AFI, so you can expect insane numbers and shooting down a lot of planes overall. Okay, let's talk about Dalarna, which is another pan-European destroyer. A Holland's upgrade, a super destroyer, and definitely having some super capabilities in terms of having 9 flags. If I can show you, it has not 7, not 8, but 9 flags in a single salvo when it just throws a lot of flags. That is really powerful, okay? It's gonna get a lot much rougher if the enemy CV is not really trying to dodge these flags. They will take huge amount of, or I would say they will just completely lose all the planes. And one more thing about the Dalarna compared to Holland, it does have access to a defensive AFI because it's a super upgrade over Holland. So defensive AFI is pretty good. You have slightly better medium range AA guns, but not a whole lot. Like it's slightly increased from 364 to 398 this time. In the case of long range AA, it's definitely a decent improvement from 151 to 221. So definitely long range increase is very good, which means that you will be taking a lot of AA damage. 221 along with defensive AFI can be pretty powerful in Dalarna. And I would say Dalarna is the best anti-air destroyer in this game. If you hate absolutely carriers, if you are divisioning up with carrier, Dalarna is a no-brainer, and Dalarna will certainly be, doing a whole lot of damage to the carrier planes. And I don't think so any good player carrier will try to drop Dalarna many times in their game. It's because it's having really powerful AA, no matter what. Even though you are a good player, it's still gonna be pretty rough for even good players. So yeah, Dalarna with this insane continuous AA damage increase over Holland, and with this a lot of flags, and obviously if you have Jerzy Swirsky, which I have already talked about, you know what's going to happen. You will just going to shred a lot of planes. Without a shadow of doubt, this destroyer is a good torpedo boat, and if you like Shimakaze, or maybe other torpedo boat, I think Dalarna is also pretty good. Not the damage that you expect from these torpedoes much, but the entire defense is just absolutely insanely good compared to Shimakaze or Goering or Z-52 in general, which is very, very nice. Okay, so let's talk about Smaland. It's a rare destroyer. It's one of the very strongest, I would say, broken destroyer in this game in terms of his amazing firepower, and I can just talk about days and days about how good and capable this destroyer really is in its firepower, and it also have access to torpedoes, not high damaging. But the good thing is that even though you do have a radar and all that good shenanigans, like insanely good speed boost, it has access to Holland's base entire defense. Yeah, the long range A and the medium range A is basically similar like Holland. It's almost ditto copy same. Smaland and Halland A is basically same, except the Smaland does not have access to defensive fire. But again, it has 6 shell explosions in a salvo. I mean, I have probably increased it with this build. Yeah, if you have Fearless Brawler, you will have 1 shell, or I would say flak increase, and that's why you're seeing 7 flaks compared to Holland 6, because I don't use the Holland with the Fearless Brawler. So you can see here that why Smaland is another very, very strong anti-defense destroyer in this game. I won't say better than Holland just because of defensive air fire, but still this continuous damage is going to be pretty detrimental for carriers, and especially if they are under 4 kilometers, it's going to go really bad for them. But if you maybe talk about the Ragnar compared to Ragnar Smaland, well, Ragnar does have superior continuous A damage, but really terrible long-range A guns, or I would say A damage compared to the Smaland. So that's one thing that you should be keeping in mind. But still, overall, is the Smaland is really good. Without a shadow of doubt, very good anti-defense destroyer. If you don't have it, unfortunately, it's going to be coming in Santa boxes if you are really looking forward to that. Otherwise, you will not going to be getting this ship anytime. But anyway, so unfortunately, that's the case for that. Okay, so let's talk about the ships that you can actually get right now. And Groningen is available for coal. You can get this Dutch destroyer, Groningen, for pretty cheap. I mean, coal is pretty easy to grind in this game. It's just gonna take some time. But once you grind the coal, you can get the insane DPM gunboat, as well as really, really strong anti-defense at this tier. Groningen having almost similar capabilities as compared to Holland. Couple of things that I want to explain about the Groningen as well as Friesland, by the way. Friesland was available as well for 1 million free XP before they removed it, and they just replaced it with Groningen. The difference between the Friesland and Groningen is basically I would say one is of other nation and Groningen is of another nation, but everything is pretty much copy-paste similar, literally similar. In terms of the damage, continuous damage that I'm talking about here, well, it's only 20% less mid-range A damage. And obviously the firing range is not 4 kilometers, but it's 3.5 kilometers. So at least that is something that you should be keeping in mind. Reducing the medium range firing range, I would say, is definitely hampers Groningen capability of anti-defense a bit compared to Holland, but the continuous air damage is still very, very good. Very, very respectable, only 20% less compared to Holland, and the long-range air guns is pretty much similar, I would say slightly higher compared to Holland, which is 162 in this case. So that's basically the similarities, or I would say the differences between Groningen and the Holland. As you can see, the flags are still the same, 7. Since I'm using the Fearless Brawler, and that's why I'm getting extra flak. But it's basically similar in terms of Holland anti-defenses, except a couple of things which I have explained really in this case. And the best part about the Groningen is that you will be facing a lot of tier 8 carriers with having pretty much almost similar levels of anti-defense of Holland. That's, I would say, about the Groningen. So you will be shooting down a lot of planes of tier 8 carriers. I can guarantee you that you will be getting a defense expert in Groningen if you are facing tier 8 carriers. Even against tier 10s, it's going to be pretty good, especially with the defensive AFI that it has. So, and also it does have smoke, so you can even disengage if you really hate carriers, and if he's trying to really piss you off by just keeping you spotted. You do also have smoke compared to other destroyers in this game, so definitely it will help a lot. Now I have only talked about maybe the pan-European destroyers, okay? And you might be thinking, is there any other nation that has really good anti-destroyer? Well, Joshua Humphreys definitely come into my mind because it's also similar to Holland, except a couple of differences I would explain here. Now, in the case of Joshua Humphreys, it has a couple of very good things, okay? Well, it's a super destroyer. One thing that is definitely a big weakness, I would say, and will be a dent on your economy, but if you do not like carriers, it will definitely help a lot. Now, the medium range AA guns, okay? It's basically pretty much similar to Holland. 4 kilometer fire range, as well as only 35% less DPM of medium range AA guns, which is 235 compared to like Holland's 340 or something. So 35% less medium range AA damage compared to Holland, but it also have extra short range AA guns, as well as pretty much similar long range AA guns, 6 kilometer range. But to help the Joshua Humphreys even further, it has come up with defensive fire. And you might be thinking that why are you trying to basically emphasize on that defensive fire? Because this is a unique AA defense, okay? It has 100% increase of continuous damage. So basically, you will get the continuous damage 2 times compared to normal. So for example, in the case of short range AA guns, it will go from 74 to like 150. The medium range is also going to get multiplied by 2 instead of 1.5, I would say. So you will get double the DPM as compared to 50% that you usually get from defensive fire bonus, which is a really, really cool thing. So you probably gets very closer to the Halland levels of AA defense once you pop defensive fire with extra short range AA guns as well as some really decent long range AA gun as well. The long range AA gun will get really, really powerful for the Joshua Humphreys, so that's really good. And the gimmicks that it has with the F key and torpedoes that are pretty decent, well, that's really good thing about the Joshua Humphreys. So you can use it to smoke your cruisers or maybe try to give covers to your teammates with defensive fire. It will help a lot. So it's almost Holland, but just 35% less medium range continuous AA damage at least. So definitely you can pick it up and can try to deal pretty decent damage against those planes that are coming towards you. At least you can mitigate some of the damage that they will try to do in the second strike at least. Another pan-European destroyer that I want to talk about is going to be the Ostergotland. Now, this ship is at tier 9, it's a Tech 3 destroyer, and it has actually pretty decent anti-defense as well. Now, if I can just upgrade the hull real quick, because I haven't put the B hull. The continuous AA damage compared to Holland, there are a couple of differences, okay? Holland does have better long-range AA guns, which is 150 compared to only 70 in Ostergotland, but the medium-range AA guns having a couple of differences. First, the firing range is less, 3.5 kilometer, as compared to Holland's 4 kilometer, and the medium-range AA guns have almost similar continuous AA damage, maybe 10% less compared to Holland's like 350, 47. That sort of number you can get on Holland, and Ostergotland has similar levels of medium-range AA guns, but obviously it does suffer from pretty mediocre long-range AA guns. So if a good carrier player understands this, he will just quickly get a strike and get out of that medium-range aura, and will just take pretty much little, I would say pretty negligible sort of damage, unless you are popping defensive fire, which obviously helps a lot to increase this continuous AA damage to like around 100 in long-range AA guns, as well as doing pretty substantial improvement in medium-range AA guns by just using defensive fire. And that's where Ostergotland really shines. So Ostergotland is surprisingly also having a really good anti-air, but it should, I would say, not should be a surprise. It's a pan-European destroyer, and a lot of pan-European destroyers have good anti-air defenses in this game. Other ships kind of suffers. I don't know why they are not adding some good anti-destroyers on other nations, but I really hope that they do so. Until then, you can just play these ships, and we'll try to have some mitigation against anti-air, or I would say carrier, plane damage that it can do to you in a ship. So yeah, that's one thing that you should be keeping in mind. Another ship that comes to my mind in terms of, I would say, half decent, I won't say like really good, it's just slightly above average, and that is going to be Harugumo compared to other nations in this game. Now, it's not like really close to even Holland, but Harugumo certainly has something which is almost similar compared to Holland. For example, in the case of long-range A guns, it is pretty much similar to the Holland, okay? The medium range is basically completely like half, only 123. It could be slightly buffed with the flag, but it's still gonna go around like 140 medium range A guns, which is pretty much similar to Holland, but it is half of that, and it does not even access to have the defensive air fire that Holland has, resulting in the anti-defense, which is okay, but slightly better than other destroyers, at least compared to pan-European destroyers. Harugumo definitely is worse compared to pan-European destroyers, but at least it's better than other nations, and that's why I'm talking about Harugumo. But the problem with the Harugumo really is that it is pretty much bad in maneuverability, really bad turning circle, and the speed is not too good, and the big hull, long hull definitely makes Harugumo vulnerable against aircraft carrier. And since you don't have heals, the entire defense kind of feels a lot much more overall less practically, because you will take a lot more damage from carrier in general because of the big ship that you are. So yeah, that's one of the problem with the Harugumo. I can show you the ship, but I have resetted this line, and that's why I cannot do so. But Harugumo is also sort of noteworthy to talk about, and that's what I exactly did. If you're looking to get the best anti-destroyer at tier 8, Fenyang definitely comes into my mind. Now, Fenyang has defensive air fire, and the reason why I want to talk about Fenyang, which is a pan-Asian destroyer, is because, just like I said, defensive air fire, slightly weaker medium range and long range air guns compared to like Friesland and Groningen at tier 9. So these are the differences, combined with the fact that it has defensive air fire, makes it a really viable destroyer. Especially, it has the highest AA damage rating with defensive air fire that you can only get on Fenyang. I would say it's the best destroyer at tier 8 in terms of entire defenses. So if you don't like carriers, this premium destroyer, even I don't have that, but in the case of factual numbers, it definitely holds itself up pretty well, and definitely worthy to pick because of defensive air fire and decent continuous damage at least at tier 8. You will be pretty good, I would say excellent against tier 6 carriers. You will be shredding down those planes pretty hard. Against tier 8, you will be also having pretty good time with it, especially once you have popped up the defensive air fire against enemy carrier planes at tier 8. You will be having some at least mitigation of those damage output that carrier can do against you. So that's where Fenyang is decent. One ship that I want to mention that is very much comparable to Harugumo, I would say slightly better than Harugumo in some cases, is going to be the Tromp, a Dutch destroyer that have pretty non-existent long-range air guns, and this is the biggest weakness of Tromp itself. But it does have medium range air guns, which is having a rating of 274. If I put the flag, it will get up to almost 300, which is pretty decent, right? The Holland is having like 340 something, and the Tromp has at least some level of retainment of the Holland AA that is present on the medium range air guns. But again, the firing range is less than Holland, and unfortunately, it does not have any flak whatsoever. No long range AA guns means no flak, and that's what is the case with Tromp. But at least it has defensive air fire, so it will have absurdly high continuous air damage, very much closer to Holland it will get if you use defensive air fire. But other than that, I would say it's pretty much comparable to Harugumo without defensive air fire. This is one more ship that I want to talk about. So if you are really looking forward to a ship that does not have long range air guns but having unique capabilities, with airstrikes that it has, which is pretty unique. Well, Tromp is something that can do a bit of damage against aircraft carriers, but don't expect pan-European destroyer-like capabilities, at least in Tromp. And that's basically about it. One more ship that comes to my mind is going to be Marceau. Now, Marceau, again, having pretty much similar levels of anti-defense like Harugumo, but what makes it really good is, well, you are absolutely insane in terms of your speed capabilities. Like, your speed can go up to like what, 55 knots with the speed boost that you use, and the flag, the speed flag that you can get onto the ship. But you have access to defensive air fire, unlike Kleber. So if I can just look at the continuous air damage, it's almost like half, or even like slightly less than half compared to Holland, the medium range air guns, and 3.5 kilometer firing range compared to Holland's 4 kilometer. But it has access to short range air guns as well as long range air guns, slightly less than Holland. But defensive air fire definitely helps a lot. And since you having a lot of speed out there, there's a very good chance that a lot of even good carrier players will miss a lot of rockets and bombs on you, since you are very, very fast. So overall, in that regard, I think Marceau is also a destroyer that is, or I would say, deserve to be mentioned, and it's actually pretty good entire defense overall with defensive air fire. Otherwise, it's comparable to Harugumo in terms of its continuous air damage. So it's nothing like special, but at least still worthy to be talked about. Alright, so that's basically from my side. I hope you guys understand some of the capabilities that these destroyers have against aircraft carriers. Please let me know in the comments what do you think, and I will catch you guys into the next video. Peace out.